Zero tolerance was interpreted as the policy that separated children from their
If
parents.
I get arrested for DUI and I have a young child in the car, I'm going to be separated. When I was a police officer in New York and I arrested a father for domestic violence, I separated that father
Mr.
from his
Holman,
family.
with all due respect, legal asylees are not charged with any crime.
When you're into the country illegally, it's violation 8 United States Code 1325.
Seeking asylum is legal.
If you want to seek asylum and go through the port of entry, do it the legal way.
I think, there's so many different terms that people use, and you've kind of gone over a little bit. One of the biggest ones is asylum seeker. What exactly does that mean? What's the process for seeking asylum? How has that changed? Because I know we've had different periods where, they can apply from the country that they live in versus coming here and perhaps getting some kind of temporary status and waiting for the result of that application. I mean, and that's just one of the most common topics that people discuss. Maybe go over that with us.
Yes, absolutely. So in U.S. immigration law, we follow what's called the Refugee Act of 1980. And this also works with the United Nations. You cannot file for asylum in the United States if your physical body is not in the U.S. If you are seeking refugee from your country outside of the U.S., then you are called a refugee. And you have to go to the United Nations and you have to apply to the United Nations and be interviewed through their process. And through their process in the United Nations, you're allowed to choose like 3 countries, and then those countries vet you. And then from there, you're determined whether or not you're going to go to, let's say, Sweden, or you're going to go to Denmark, or you're going to come to the US. And then you come to the United States as a refugee. When you come to the US as a refugee, you get certain government benefits, you get certain government assistance. And after 1 year and 1 day, you are eligible to apply for your lawful permanent resident status. You have already been vetted. You have already been shown that you are going to face persecution or fear of past persecution in your country. So those people who come in as a refugee in a lot of ways are already settled because they have gone through the process in their country. Now, it's a lot easier said than the actual process of it. People can wait years in refugee camps. Years waiting to be interviewed, years waiting to go through the process. This isn't like you go in and you just ask for it and you get it. The people there there are hundreds of thousands of people in different situations all over the world. And there's only certain places you can go and ask for the refugee too, where the United Nations is set up that allows you to do that. Okay, so that's the refugee process. Okay, then you have the asylum process. That is for somebody who is physically in the United States and they are completing an application for protection in the United States and seeking that asylum. That's why you see the terms, for example, asylum seeker. They are trying to get an asylum status in the U.S. Now, legally, you have 1 year to apply for asylum from your date of entry, and you have to meet a certain type of classification. You have to be able to demonstrate that you are either going to face future persecution or past persecution based on either religion, nationality, political opinion, particular social group, or ethnicity. And you have to develop that connection, what we call that nexus, between being in that category versus that persecution that either has already happened or that may happen. When you apply for asylum in the United States, if your application is pending for more than 180 days, 6 months, you're eligible to apply for a work permit. Okay. If you do what is called an affirmative asylum, means you're applying directly with USCIS, you are going to be interviewed specifically by an asylum officer. These are highly trained immigration office officials that have been trained just to discuss asylum matters with the applicant to make sure that this applicant fits the legal requirement. The reality is that yes, asylum seeking and the asylum process in the United States has been abused. It has been taken advantage of. There are people who file what we call frivolous asylum cases in order to generate a work permit. This is because when the asylum application goes on, there is not a human there seeing if they meet all the elements. There's just a human there processing the application. And over the years, there have been an influx of asylum applications, so much so that we have hundreds of thousands of asylum cases that are currently pending. We only have 11 asylum offices in the entire country that processes asylum applications. This has created a massive backlog to the point where I have asylum applications that I filed in 2012 that are still pending.
Wow. I
Now,
had no idea that there were only 11 offices. That's insane.
yes. And
Considering the number of people that we keep hearing are applying for asylum,
Mhm.
it seems impossible that they'd be able to process that many.
So you're right. So now what happened to this? So I would say back in 2017, what really created the backlog was the influx of Venezuelans that came in with what happened in Venezuela, with the basically destruction of the government. USCIS that year accepted over 500,000 asylum applications. And they changed the process to something called last in, first out. No, first in, last out. I always forget it, but basically, you file the asylum, and they're trying to streamline you out. And then the older cases are the cases that are waiting. Okay, but the problem is that first of all, too many of them came, so it doesn't even that process doesn't even work. Second of all, the longer you wait, the less fear you're going to have. Because how can you demonstrate that your asylum case of waiting of 12 years still carries the same weight as when you filed it 12 years ago?
Right.
So in the meantime, what happens? You either brought kids in when you were younger, so they've been going to school and they're probably excelling at school because, that mentality of do good, do good, do good. This is what happens. You have the issue that you buy a house, you have a good job, you work your butt off, you're in this asylum pending status. Then you go to your asylum interview and the officer is like, but the fear is not there anymore. They cannot approve your case. So then you get referred to court. And then that's when you get into deportation.
Okay.
And if you don't have any other relief, you cannot stay here just because you've been here that long. You cannot stay here just because your kid is doing good in school. You cannot stay here because your boss wrote you an employment letter. You need to have a immigrant foundational basis to stay here. And if you don't have it, you're going to be ordered deported.
Wow. That's actually really interesting. I mean, because like I said, asylum seeking is just something that a lot of people talk about. But so would it be in people's best interest, like once they apply for that asylum you said they have to wait a year and a day to go?
Once they apply for that asylum, they have to wait 6 months to get the
6
work
months.
permit.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So it would be best for them to get further in the process as quickly as they can. Do you find that people are kind of hoping to ride that asylum case and just get themselves established and then they won't be deported?
That's a good question because, I personally, I am very thorough with my consultations and I really do speak about the realities of this, but people are desperate and a lot of them are thinking of the now.
Right.
And they are hopeful and they're willing to take that risk.
Okay.
There isn't anything else they can do.
Right.
Their alternative is to withdraw it and go back to their country. As long as they know that there is a high probability that they're not going to get it, and that this is what their situation is. They're waiting to see if something will pass in the law. They're waiting to see if a major change circumstance happen. They're waiting to take their risk. For them, the risk is worth it.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that after 10, 15 years, you may have no choice but to go back. But then I speak to the people who did go through the asylum case, who do have the order of deportations, who didn't go back, and they
Mhm.
just live amongst us.
Mm-hmm.
And there
Yeah.
are a lot of them.
Yeah.
And that can bring you into maybe discussing who is going to be targeted for
Right.
these quote unquote mass deportations.
Right. Thank you for watching this clip from Outspoken Samantha. Please be sure to like and subscribe.